Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem. This is a postmortem of my Blitz game number 273. My opponent kicked off with c4 and we get into the English opening. So I play knight f6. He plays g3. And you'll see that's not the most common move here, but these other moves, d4, knight f3, are ways of transposing back into queen's pawn openings. Knight c3 and g3 are the main ways to stay within the English. Knight c3, the most common of those, but g3 is a respectable move as well. Good score for white in that line. Immediately putting a bishop on this light squared diagonal where white's trying to build up pressure. I go for c6. The third choice here, e5, is a way to play, getting into a what's that called? A reverse Sicilian, or e6 building up to d5 perhaps, or c6. So c6 introduces the idea maybe of playing b5 later and also blunting the bishop. He goes bishop g2 anyway, and then I play g6, getting this kind of setup with the fianchetto going in this direction. So that was not the most common choice there. e5 or d5 are the typical ways to proceed. Probably slightly better than what I played, but this is okay too. Knight f3. Again, d4 could be played and we'd get into some kind of Slav-like position. Okay, I go bishop g7, and actually you see that we've transposed back into a normal line. If you look at the numbers after I play the move g6, there's only 2 games. Before I play g6, there's only 2 games at this particular position, with this particular position in the database. But after g6, we transposed into a more normal position. Probably g6 was played a little earlier. And then he could follow up with d4, but he plays knight f3, and once again we've gotten into a position where it can be reached by many means, but it's interesting. It's sort of typical of the English opening in general. It's kind of a flexible opening that way, that you can transpose in amongst the various different lines, but it makes it confusing to study and hard to come up with a set line against it. Anyway, finally here I play the most common move, bishop g4, and my opponent plays the move a3, which takes us out of the opening book altogether. If we were to continue, if we back up one move here, if we were to continue in normal lines, say not d4 but in English lines, then castling or knight c3 would be typical ways to play, or even b3, setting up a double fianchetto system. So a3, a bit of an unusual move there, and we'll just look at the notation tab. So the game continues, just normal developing moves for a while. Castling, queen c2. Thought queen c2, I guess it's okay. It seems like it's a bit of a target there, but he's going to play d6 anyway. d3 rather. I play d6. He goes b4. Here the engine thinks I should immediately counterattack his queenside pawn expansion with the move a5. Didn't really think about that. I was thinking more about the center. And this move d6, not my usual move here. I think I usually play for e6 and d5 and try and set up this pawn triangle, but I was trying something different, just controlling these squares around my side of the board, and then preparing e5, which I go ahead and play here. So kind of a slow build up to a reverse Sicilian type of position, but a closed Sicilian. Okay, bishop b2, and now I throw in bishop f5, attacking his queen, asking what he wants to do with it, and he plays d3. So I was wondering, is there some way to take advantage of the fact that the d pawn is pinned and is not supporting the c pawn, but the queen is supporting the c pawn. I couldn't really find any way to attack it. So just continue developing knight bd7, knight bd2, and rook to c8, putting the rook opposite the queen. Often a good idea. Castles, and development is mostly completed here. All the pieces are out. The rook is on a square which is potentially active, so I play c5 here, but c5 is just a blunder. This is one of those places where I was showing my rustiness here at Blitz, but it just leaves the e-pawn hanging. It's got 2 attackers and only 1 defender, and there's no tactic here. He can just take the pawn and be pretty much a clean pawn up. So for whatever reason my opponent didn't do that. He pushed on with c5, and now I should pause and just defend the pawn and probably sit on this central formation. But I pushed on with e4, and Knight d4 is given as an interesting idea for white here. Just going after my bishop on f5 and saying, what is that bishop really doing there? We get kind of a similar line in a little bit. He takes, and now I should take with a piece. I take back with a pawn. I was thinking, oh, I'd chase his knight away to a bad square, but his knight has a good square, which is d4. So chasing the knight to a good square is not really helping my cause, and then this pawn in the long run is going to be weak in a sense. I mean, it's tying up my pieces to defend it, and it's easily coming under attack, and there's no natural pawn move because my pieces are in the way, so there's no natural pawn move to defend it. So it's a misguided plan from me. Now my opponent plays knight h4, not quite as good as knight d4, but still with the idea of taking the bishop, and pretty good. So I play rook e8. The engine recommends just playing bishop g4 and giving up the pawn and playing for compensation. But anyway, I was trying to hold on to the pawn. So now white has quite an edge here. Knight takes. I take back. And I guess this kind of +2 edge is usually a winning position. So let's see. I mean, my opponent immediately goes astray and starts making moves that are not the best. But let's see how the engine would follow up. So knight c4, getting his knight to an active piece. I mean, a place. His one problem piece here, I guess, is this bishop. But I have my own problems, so so maybe it's not an issue. The engine's recommending knight d5 for me. Seems logical. And now bishop takes g7, getting rid of my active bishop. And knight to d6. Forking the two rooks. Okay. So yeah, there's a way for white to win material pretty quickly in this position. So this knight c4 idea, knight c4 to d6. After knight c4, is there any way to avoid, say if I don't play knight d5, if I play something like I did in the game, like rook to e6, does this help? Then bishop h3, going after the weak f pawn. Yeah, so white is just good here. Just got to play the precise move. So he played a move e3 here in the game, and this helps me a lot. It locks up the position, and I still have this weakness on f4, but his knight is not yet coming in to fork my rooks, so I will survive for a little bit, and I have some active moves I can play. I start with knight e5, and he goes rook a to d1, and I continue with knight to d3. The engine likes knight d5 better here, so knight d3. And once again, knight c4, probably with this idea in mind, is the engine recommendation, but he plays bishop takes. He plays bishop to d4. Just blocking up. Yeah, I didn't think this was a good move. It turns this bishop into a large pawn. But the bishop is still looking on this diagonal, so my bishop is not ever doing anything either. So I continue with knight g4, trying to go for some counterplay against f2. And he plays knight c4, finally getting this move in with this threat. And here I wanted to play bishop takes d4. Because bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes just wins this pawn. And I saw this threat of knight to d6, and I thought I needed to deal with that, and I played rook e6. But the engine is saying I should take the bishop anyway. Bishop takes. If he throws in knight d6 here, I can play bishop. I can just retreat the bishop back to g7. And then he could grab one of the rooks, or he can take on f5. But I've grabbed a piece, so it's 2 pieces for a rook is good for me. Yeah, so this is good. So it's all about the timing. So if he can take back with the pawn now, and I can grab it like I wanted to, and then he's got knight d6. But at least I've gotten a pawn for the exchange, and maybe more. Queen e5. And queen to d2, eyeing the square. And now rook c to d8. And then queen g5 check. Interpose with the queen. Takes, takes. It's funny, the engine doesn't want to grab the exchange, it wants to grab the pawn. I suppose because this helps liberate his bishop. This pawn will become weakened. He can round that up and free his bishop. Anyway, and white's doing well in this line. So, but it was playable, and it was actually the best way. I mean, white was doing well, but it wasn't like an overwhelming advantage. But I played rook e6 to stop this knight fork, and now he can play bishop takes g7. He didn't play this. Bishop takes g7, king takes g7, and f3, kicking my knight. So if I take here, oh, his knight is still guarding the e3 square. Yeah, that's the point. He plays f3 later when his knight is not guarding e3. So if I take here, then rook takes f3. Okay, that's no good. Rook takes knight. I left this knight hanging. So I have to retreat my knight. And f takes e4. Yeah, this is looking pretty sad. And bishop to h3, skewering the rooks. So kind of a long sequence there, but the point is, I guess, that this rook to e6 move placed these rooks on a diagonal, which makes them vulnerable to tactics. So anyway, after rook e6, he played knight to d6, just going for this is a good square for his knight and attacking my rook. So maybe he can't be faulted for missing that kind of complicated tactical sequence. But I don't know, some of those moves are pretty logical, like exchanging the bishop and playing f3. Okay, so I went ahead and grabbed the exchange here, and so even though I'm down the exchange, I've got a pawn for it, and it's not too awful a position. Now he takes, so, and plays queen to, oh, after he takes, I take back, he plays queen to c3 check, right? And I interpose the queen. I was thinking this endgame maybe isn't too bad. So he had a better move than queen c3 check. Just h3, kicking the knight with the h-pawn, yeah. So after this exchange, then he played f3, but now this just gives me back the exchange, basically. So h3, once again, is the move, the way to kick the knight, while the e-pawn stays defended. But even with that move, h3, knight g to e5, I am down the exchange here, but my pieces are pretty well placed, and his bishop is a bit tied up. So this is probably an opening, or a position I could hold. Not one I would likely win, but maybe I could hold this for a draw. Okay, so he played f3, which is a mistake, and I can now grab the pawn on e3 and fork the two rooks. And so now black is slightly better, but it's in the range of even. And yeah, I guess knight takes d1 is the way to play it. Knight takes f1 is playable too, but maybe not quite as good. After knight takes f1, rook takes d3 is the best way to play. So the way I played it, I took this rook, also trying to lure his rook away from the f-file. So rook takes d1, and then that gives me time to reposition this knight or defend it with f takes e4. So I thought, hey, maybe I'm going to end up up a pawn because I've got 3 on 2 over here. But he takes here with a fork. So he spotted this one. So I'm going to lose one piece and we'll be in an even position here. And the engine agrees. It's not only even material, but there's no tactics to justify one side or the other winning. So the game continues in this fashion, say about even for a while. We do some maneuvering. It's a bit tricky to play. I really didn't want to defend this pawn. It says rook e8, hitting his bishop maybe was a way to play it. Rook e8, bishop to g2. If you can find a way to avoid getting into a really defensive position, yeah, rook e7. So the way to avoid it is to exchange rooks. Well, he can avoid the exchange by retreating his rook. Yeah, that would certainly be drawish. Okay, so not wanting to exchange rooks, I played my rook here, but now my rook is in a passive position, and White has the active play. I tried to do some stuff with my knight. Didn't really work out too well. But right here, so starting to get a little low on time, I think, by this point. After he checked me, my king needs to go to e7, hitting his rook and staying off the light squares. When I go here, he has this check, bishop c2, which he didn't play. And king to g4, my king is going to be a little bit awkwardly placed. The rook is cutting off my escape, and these pawns can come forward. And it looks like h4 check is the start of a winning plan for white. Okay, so my opponent missed that and played rook h6. And, let's back up. Rook h6, and I played f6. Rook h7, king here attacking his rook. Bishop c2, king goes forward. His king comes forward. It's a little bit scary playing this way. So now I need to do something about this h4 check. It looks like the engine is recommending the move f5 as a way to stay in the game. After a6, I should lose to h4 check. So if he plays h4 check, which he did, okay, I go king g4, only move. And what's the killer blow here? Rook g7 check. Yeah, I had a bad feeling about this during the game. He played bishop d1 check, and it's not as accurate because it lets my king escape through the square f5 when he checks this way. So, however, if he were to check with the rook, his bishop is guarding this square, pawn is guarding that square, his king is guarding that square. So my king is forced to h5, and then he can creep forward with his king, and I'm getting boxed in here. He can start moving these pawns forward with tempo. Let's see, after that, rook h8 is recommended to try and defend against, I suppose, a check on the h-file. And now rook takes b7. He starts mopping up pawns over here. So that's the way for white to win the game. So this bishop d1 check, not the most accurate move, and I escape once again. So he chases me around a bit. He starts advancing his pawns. And I think that was the last big mistake. And I try to get my rook active finally. And I'm doing pretty well. And in fact, here, it's still, let's see, half a point in favor of white. Maybe not a winning margin. Let's see. I should have played rook to g4 check and traded rooks here. Okay. And that would have been a way to draw it. I just ran out of time here and lost on time. But white has all the pressure in this position. It was difficult to find the right move. But the way to maintain a draw is probably this check, rook b2. And if the king goes back, then I'll just keep giving checks. So the king goes forward, and then I can go to b1, and then eventually come over here and get behind the pawn. Again, if the king goes back, then I can check it again. So to avoid a perpetual, white leaves his king there, and then I get my rook behind it. Oh, it says that's directly going there directly is not the most accurate. It's check here. King to f2. Why not defend the rook? Oh, because I can't take the rook. I can't take the rook here because he queens. So now rook to h1. And rook to f5. Okay, so there's getting to be a long sequence, but I did manage to get my rook to g1 in this line, which stops the pawn from going to the queening square. And it looks like I can continue to fight on and perhaps hold a draw in this position. But I was low on time, and it's hard to find all of those moves. So actually right here, let's get to the final position. Before that, yeah, I'd played rook takes b5, and he played h6, and I ran out of time here. So this is how the game ended. So a little bit rusty there, but hope you guys enjoyed that anyway. I will see you again soon. Bye.